going to call this meeting of the Oskaloosa City Council to order. It is Monday, December 16, 2019. We start with the invocation by Pastor Jeremy Empey, Bethesda House.
Father God,
Father God, we thank you for this evening.
Thank you for allowing us
Thank you for allowing us to be here.
We have no perfect will.
We ask that your purpose will be done in these chambers. Let's make the right decisions. Let us make the godly decisions. That will let this town grow. In the name of Jesus we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thanks, Jerry.
Would you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Burnett.
Here.
Calgary.
Here.
Dross.
Here.
Moore.
Here.
Addison.
Here.
Walling.
Here.
Yates.
Here.
Okay. Next item up is the opportunity for the oath of office to be administered to folks who got reelected back in November. And so, Amy, I believe we start off with you offering the oath to me.
Please raise your hand, right hand, and
Okay.
repeat after me. I, David Cruisevelt, do solemnly swear
I, David Cruisevelt, do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Iowa,
and the Constitution of the State of Iowa,
and that I will faithfully and impartially,
and I will faithfully and impartially,
to the best of my ability,
to the best of my ability,
discharge the duties of mayor in Oskaloosa, Iowa,
discharge the duties of mayor in Oskaloosa, Iowa,
as now or hereafter required by law.
as now or hereafter required by law. Thank you, Amy. I'd like to call Robert Drost. Raise your right hand. Repeat after me. I, Robert Drost,
I, Robert Dross,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Iowa,
and the Constitution of the State of Iowa,
and I will faithfully and impartially,
and I will faithfully and impartially,
to the best of my ability,
to the best of my ability,
discharge the duties of Second Ward Council member
discharge my duties as Second Ward Council member
in Oskaloosa, Iowa,
in Oskaloosa, Iowa,
as now or hereafter required by law.
as now or hereafter required by law.
Welcome back. Next, let's go with Steve Burnett. Gotta do them all the same. Raise your right hand. I, Steve Burnett,
I, Steve Burnett,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Iowa,
and the Constitution of the State of Iowa,
and I will faithfully and impartially,
and I will faithfully and impartially,
to the best of my ability,
to the best of my ability,
discharge the duties of Fourth Ward Council member
discharge the duties of Fourth Ward Council member
in Oskaloosa, Iowa,
in Oskaloosa, Iowa,
as now or hereafter required by law.
as now or hereafter required by law.
Welcome back.
Thanks, sir.
Finally, Joe Caligieri. Raise your right. Oh, you already done that. Okay. Like you've done done this before. Yeah. I, Joe Caligiuri,
I, Joe Caligiuri,
do solemnly swear
solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Iowa, and I will faithfully and impartially, to the best of my ability, discharge the duties of at-large council member
duties of at-large council
in Oskaloosa, Iowa,
in Oskaloosa, Iowa,
as now or hereafter required by law.
is not hereafter required by law.
Welcome back. Let the minutes reflect the loud applauses for Joe.
We were just happy you were done.
Okay, moving on, this is the opportunity for community comments. This item is reserved to receive comments from the community for concerns whether or not they're included in the current agenda. The community is encouraged to come and speak before the mayor and city council, asked to keep statements brief, time limited to no more than 3 minutes. Any questions should be asked to the city staff, council members, or the mayor prior to speaking to the full council, so concerns can be properly researched and perhaps answered away from the meeting. Comments are to be directed to the mayor and city council only. Is there anyone who would care to speak tonight? Seeing none, we'll move on. Next up is the consent agenda. These are all items that are considered routine in nature. There were a few that I wanted to call out. Item E is the appointment of James Johnson to the Airport Commission. Item F is the appointment of Cody Landgrebe and Tim Murray going to the Board of Adjustment. And item G is a motion appointing Ross Knobb to the Historic Preservation Commission. Also, item K is a resolution setting a date for a public hearing for an ordinance amending Chapter 17.36 regarding floodplain management regulations. That hearing is on January 6th. And finally, also item L, resolutions that is a public hearing for January 21st, where we consider levying special assessment against private property for weed cutting. Do we have a motion supporting the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? Roll call, please.
Walling,
Yes.
Yates,
Yes.
Burnett.
Yes.
Caligiuri,
Yes.
Dross,
Yes.
Moore,
Yes.
Augustine.
Yes.
Okay, that passes. Gets us into the regular agenda. Item A is a resolution approving the site plan for the YMCA Recreation and Early Childhood Education Center. It's gonna be at 1521 Green Street. Site plan application's been submitted, and it's located near the Lacey Sports Complex. The site currently consists of 4 parcels that are owned by 3 entities: Oskaloosa Community School District, Mahaska Community Recreation Foundation, and the Daily Real Estate Company, LLC. Proposed facility will total 88,401 gross square feet on approximately 12 acres. The amenities will include a gymnasium, recreation and competition pools, racquetball courts, wellness center, preschool, early education center, daycare, and a lounge. Exterior building materials are going to be brick, limestone, architectural metal, and glass. Landscaping on sidewalks will be provided per code. Stormwater detention is provided in a regional basin north of the building and proposed public street segment. The site is zoned R1, Single Family Residential District. Board of Adjustment granted a conditional use permit for the recreational club and general daycare center at their November 26th meeting. The remaining civic uses are permitted in the R1 district. At their December 3rd meeting, Planning and Zoning Commission voted to recommend approval of the site plan with the following conditions. Number 1 is revision of page C200C between structure 15 and 16 to meet applicable standards for storm sewer pipe and manhole installations. Item 2 was a detailed final landscaping plan that meets all applicable standards to be submitted and approved by city staff prior to the start of building construction. And finally, the landscaping or other site design be considered along Green Street, so that way it can block any headlight glare that would go to the homes on the east. So do we have a motion supporting this resolution?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, any discussion on this?
I'd just like to say I support number 3. We have to look out for those people out there on Green. You know, we're putting a lot of traffic out there, and yeah, so
Yep.
if we can help on the lighting, it'd be great.
Any other comments? Roll call, please.
Yates,
Yes.
Burnett,
Yes.
Calgery,
Yes.
Ross,
Yes.
Moore,
Yes.
Coniston,
Yes.
Walden,
Yes.
That passes. Item B is consider a resolution approving Amendment 2 to the agreement we have with SVPA Architects. On April 15 of 2019, the City Council approved Resolution 190460, which entered into a professional services agreement with SVPA for the purpose of designing the Early Childhood Education and Recreational Center project. The project at the time was estimated to include 60,000 square feet for a building, and construction budget was $16,345,000. SVPA's design fee was based on a 6.79% of the construction cost, totaling $1,110,000. On August 16 of 2019, the City Council approved Resolution 1907-125, which is a resolution approving the project's schematic design documents. The project itself has experienced an increase in scope, changing the building footprint from 60,000 square feet to 88,250 square feet, with total construction cost $26,659,250. Based upon SVPA's design fee calculation at a rate of 6.79% of the project's estimated construction cost and the revised estimated cost, Amendment 1 was presented and approved by City Council on Resolution 1910-129 on October 7 of 2019 in the amount of $700,000, taking the total design contract to $1,810,000. As the project has moved from design development to the construction document phase, the project team has confirmed that public improvements for the new street on the north side of the facility will be included in the project. The public improvement project requires additional services required for the construction administration phase of the project, specifically construction observation and as-built drawings to be performed by Garden Associates. The additional services weren't included in the scope of the original design contract with SVPA or Amendment Number 1 to the contract. So as a result, SVPA is requesting Amendment Number 2 in the amount of $15,000, bringing the total design contract to $1,825,000. So the project schedule is in your packet here. Do we have a motion to support the Amendment Number 2 for the additional $15,000?
So moved. Second.
Okay, any discussion?
Got a question. Remind me, I should know. This is about whether the street's included in the project or the city having to do the street on its own. But was this street gonna be there before we rotated the building? Like I said, I should know that, but I got to think about it yesterday.
Well, that road as it exists today is a gravel road, and actually I should pull up a better map so we can take a look at that.
Well, I'm talking about the paving. Which road you talking about?
I'll show it right. So currently, the project is going to sit on this particular site, and the road that is to be improved is essentially a replacement of this gravel road.
Well, that's private, ain't it?
And so it's currently a private road, correct? But that road will serve this facility here, obviously, as the north entrance. And the way that the recreation complex has been laid out, there appears to be a desire to have additional east-west connectivity. And so if we're going to build our facility there, and we expect traffic to go east-west on that road, there's a likelihood that it could become a public street in the future. And so we're recommending that we would build it to public street standards.
That's really not what I'm asking. What I want to know is when we rotated it at one time, not
Yeah.
the building, to make everything fit. If we hadn't have rotated it, would that road still need paved just to the project?
I would say that road might not have been paved, but it might have been a service road, so that would be one thing. The other issue is then the road serving this facility would have been coming up this road, which is Santa Clara.
Okay, but then the other second part of this, it's putting it into the bid, when the project's bid, it'll be in the package for this road.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Is it a road, that's clear, is it gonna be a road, or is that gonna be like a driveway up all the way across?
That would be considered a public road. This would be a small public road right here.
So.
But at this point, just to the project.
Yeah, I'm thinking down the road, the future, where they want to continue that road to go by the ballparks, the ball diamonds. Is that still going to be continue as a city road?
Private road, as far as I can tell, council would have to accept it as a public road. So there's been no action to
Oh, I
accept
thought you,
that.
I misunderstood. I thought you said it was going to be a public road.
The paved portion would be public.
So that'd be a
Yes, just the part we're
City,
building in the
a
project.
city road.
Yep. And then everything to the west, that's in that darker hashed right here, that would be a private drive.
Okay.
And then if there's a desire to have, for our sake, this portion to
So-
become a public road, that council would have to take action to accept that as a public
Like I
road.
said, I'm thinking of the future also here. So if that road continues, doesn't that continue to a public road right there?
Yes, so that's Kentfield Drive.
Right, so
That was improved. And then,
something to think about down the road if you make it all a public road. You know. Anyway.
Any other thoughts or questions regarding the amendment to SVPA? Roll call, please.
Burnett,
Yes.
Alger,
Yes.
Strauss,
Yes.
Moore,
Yes.
Addison,
Yes.
Walling,
Yes.
Yates,
Yes.
Okay, that passes. Next is to item C. It's a resolution approving an amendment to the professional services agreement with Calhoun Burns and Associates for the North 17th Street Bridge Replacement Project. The council previously authorized a professional services agreement with Calhoun Burns to provide the preliminary design phase engineering services for North 17th Street Bridge Replacement Project. The city was awarded bridge replacement funds. That'll reimburse the city for 80% of the project cost or $1 million, whichever is less. The project is currently scheduled to be let through the Iowa DOT on December 17th of 2019, and it requires services for the bidding and construction phases which are not part of the existing contract. The proposed amendment, Supplement Agreement 3, to the existing contract is for additional work associated with the bidding and construction phase services and the documentation required by the Iowa DOT for a post-construction audit. Okay. This supplemental agreement, number 3, would increase the contract by an additional amount of $120,000. A summary of the changes is listed here in the packet. Staff is recommending approval of the resolution supporting the supplemental agreement 3. Do we have a motion supporting that?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, discussion.
I guess my question is, if the max they can pay out is $1 million, and we're already up to almost $275,000 of design costs, can we get the bridge done and not, without the city having to come out of pocket with quite a bit more money than 20%?
So, question. So the DOT will pay up to $1 million. That means we can go up to 1.25,
Right.
80% of that. So we think we have enough money to cover for this. Tomorrow is the bid opening, so we think we have enough money to cover with the DOT funds.
If, let's say say the bid opening is and it comes up more than this, is the DOT still paying 80% of these design fees if we
So-
choose not to go forward with the project?
So DOT will pay up to $1 million. Anything beyond that, they will not. So 80% of whatever the expenses, DOT will pay up to $1 million. Anything beyond that will have to be covered by the city if it goes beyond.
Okay.
Even if, what if it's bid tomorrow and say it comes in $1.5 million and we decide not to do the project, do we get reimbursed 80% of the money that we've spent so far?
We have been, yes.
Okay, we have been
Yep,
reimbursed as we
yep.
go, okay.
Right. Thank you.
While you're up there, Keely, remind me what 1 and 2, what were those ads for?
So this is given in the
maybe you don't
resolution. There's more description there. One is basically the historical side of it.
Okay.
So, so basically the base contract was the preliminary design, where the DOT has to approve the preliminary design. And then once we found out during the preliminary design that this is historical, this is in the National Register, that's where we paid an additional $18,300. And then they finished the final design. So all of that expense so far we have expended is basically all for the design cost. And this new contract that you're going to have is for construction inspection services.
And this is the bridge that goes out past the old animal shelter to the northeast treatment plant, right?
It sure is.
Okay, I'm still confused. The 66, back to me, please. The 67 was the original, so what's the 66,950 for? Number 2.
So agreement, sorry.
Prelim design.
Number 2 is basically for the final design. So there's a preliminary design concept that has to be approved by the DOT. And then once the preliminary, where they lay out the concept where the bridge will fall, then you have to do the final design where the structure, piers, and everything, the structural engineers will have to design for the actual bridge that lays out there.
Okay, so after we got, I try to use a colorful word, but I better not, about this historical preservation of this bridge that's going nowhere, then the design costs got more because of that, because the old bridge is staying there, right? Is that what I understand?
Right.
For everybody's gonna go out and look at this bridge, I want you to all drive out and look at this bridge, because it's gonna stay there. So we're gonna build this $1 million bridge next to it to get to a sewage plant.
We all
This-
like to flush our toilets, so there's that.
I know I think different.
Yeah,
but
pumping station.
yeah, right. This is crazy, but like Michael's pointed out, Michael's done a good job. In fact, we talked about it earlier today. They actually looked at like getting another road in from the north, which I appreciate them looking at that, but it was more than this, and there's no federal funding for the other ideas. So,
Get it?
Washington DC's broke.
I don't want to get off track here, but what was so historical about this bridge? Anybody?
You know the details. It was the age and the period of time when it was
Right.
constructed.
It was built a long time ago.
Ira
Yeah.
works.
So are we going to get a plaque too?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
It'd be part of it'd be part of.
So we
Okay.
generated this work so we could feed ourselves, which is a great deal. But now we're still suffering from it. It's ridiculous. Anyway, From
a practical standpoint, as we look at our long-term wastewater plans, we are still gonna be using that facility long-term, even not as it's going to be, as you said, a pumping station. So we still are going to need access to it, correct?
We have to have access to it, correct?
world's largest pumping station.
Well,
That's the way it's
reliable.
gotta be done. I mean, we can't afford 2 plants.
Yeah, but it's gotta be reliable, it's gotta be
Right.
flood resistant.
No,
I mean, yes, it's a lot of money, but it's also fine. Let's build a big one and a good one. I think that's kind of where some of the thinking is regarding the floodplain and some of those other issues.
Well, I understand that.
So,
There was a time we couldn't get there with the last big flood we had. We couldn't get in there to sandbag and to try to save the pumps and everything else, so.
yeah. Okay, anything else anybody wants to comment? I think we've got a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Callender,
Yes.
Ross,
Yes.
Moore,
Yes.
Addison,
Yes.
Walling,
I'd vote no, but it won't do any good, so I vote yes.
Yates,
Yes.
Burnett.
Yes.
I guess that passes. Moving on, item D is the presentation and update on the acquisition and disposition of city-owned properties. Development Services Director Sean Christ has a presentation. Sean, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. Good evening. Okay, so it's been a couple of years, I think, since council has taken a look at city-owned properties. I think it was February or March of 2017, more than a couple of years, when you had a study session on this topic. So I was asked to put together some information on the activities that we've done so far, at least to date, on acquiring properties, what we've done with them, and where we're looking at here going forward in the next several months. So I'm going to go ahead and refer to my PowerPoint here as we go along. If you have any questions, feel free to interject and ask your question. I also have our building official, Mike Flab, with us here this evening, who can help as well. Okay, so just a brief outline. The way what I have in front of you here is we'll give you first an overview of the disposition policy This was adopted around that time. This is a document that we refer to quite often. So whenever we acquire a property, it establishes our policies and procedures on what we do with that. And I'll give you a little bit more information on that here shortly. We'll also go through some goals and objectives from that policy, and then we'll give you an update on properties that we have acquired, that we still have in our possession, and then also some highlights on properties that have been sold and what's become of them. And then we'll give you a summary and some hopefully some takeaway points on this activity. So an overview, I mentioned that policy that was created for disposition of city-owned properties. Council approved that in February 2017. We've been working at acquiring properties since that time. That policy sets a number of priorities for what we do with these properties. There are three of them, and the first priority is if there's an existing structure on that property, is to renovate it. If the structure isn't too far gone, it's worth saving, that would be priority number one, would be to renovate, to find someone who could renovate that property and restore it back to a productive use and also occupy it. Then the other two are to redevelop the property. So secondly is if the structure is too far gone, the structure would be demolished and we would find someone who could redevelop on that particular lot, put a building or improvements on it, bring it back to a tax-producing status. And then if that doesn't work, then the last priority then would be to return that lot to green space. Oftentimes, if the lot is too small, for example, that could be by an adjoining property owner acquiring the property and making it part of his or her yard. And then it also sets up two processes for how we go about selling those properties. First and foremost is a competitive bid. You see that quite often here at the council floor. The property we feel is worthwhile, it's valuable, it's buildable. We put it out for bids and we bring those to you for consideration. We also have a second procedure for a vacant lot sale. And what that essentially is if someone wants to apply to buy a city-owned property, typically, in the way this is worded, typically it would be a vacant lot at that point. They could bring an application to staff and then to council for consideration without going through a competitive bid process. I don't think we've seen quite as many of those, but nonetheless, that's in our policy as well as an option. So I talked about the goals and objectives of that plan. Again, our goal here is to improve the appearance of the community. We want to eliminate blight. We want to eliminate the appearance of these properties and how they can bring neighborhoods down. We also want to increase tax revenue by rebuilding on these properties as much as possible and also provide additional housing options to our residents. And as you all know, that's part of the council's strategic goals. So this list is the current list of city-owned properties that we still have in our possession. There are two additional properties that are in process at the moment, will be handed over to the city here soon, as I understand it. So I guess going through this here briefly, 207 North G, that was the property next to Wendell Campbell State Farm. That, you may recall, came to council here about this time last year. His redevelopment plans have been delayed a little bit. I think we've given you an update on that. His lease has been extended on his current building. So at this point, our recommendation is if he's unable to fulfill his obligations with that contract, we would hold on to that property for strategic development. And you can see on this list, if you look under zoning there, if there's a C in the zoning code, that stands for commercial, so that would be a commercial property. Those with an R in the code would be considered residential property. So those commercial properties on the list, I think all but one of those are all on A Avenue, and staff's recommendation is to hold on to those properties for what we're saying here, strategic development. A couple of those lots are really too small as standalone properties to develop on their own. They were originally platted as a residential lot, so what we think would make more sense is if a developer were to come along and want to combine those properties into a larger development, similar to what Mr. Campbell was proposing near State Farm, that would be in the city's best interest along that corridor. That Lot 1 Hardee's subdivision, that's the property between the Urban Park and KFC, so same would go there. And then going down that list, let's see, 805 South B. It says there in staff's recommendation, hold on to for future city development. That particular property is next to the city shop. So our materials yard It's right next door, so we acquired that property through the abandonment proceedings, and our recommendation is to hold on to that in case we ever have a need to expand the city shop operations. The remainder of the properties on that list are all residential. Most of those are all really too small, again, to develop on their own. So our recommendation is to sell to an adjacent property owner. And we'll be reaching out to a number of them as we move forward. Now what I'll do in the next several slides is just give you some highlights of some of the properties that we've acquired and have since sold and what's become of them. So this isn't an all-inclusive list. There are a number of properties that aren't going to be shown here. But we wanted to at least touch on some of the highlights. Some of these you've already seen. This slide, 1212 First Avenue West, is a Habitat for Humanity property. They bought the property from the city, and they're currently developing on that lot, building that single-family home that you see there. Estimated value of that home when complete is $131,000, and that work is still in progress, and I think will continue until next summer. And then similarly, the lot next door is also a Habitat lot. And this home was moved from, I think, outside of town, if I recall correctly, New Sharon, is that right? So they're still working on this home as well, and I would expect a similar time frame on this property. Estimated value when complete, $90,000. 412 North H, this was sold to Paul Scanlon. He demolished the home that was on the property that you can see there. And his plan is to build a single-family home, estimated value $185,000. 1327 9th Avenue East. This is actually well, council just recently approved the sale of this property. And it's a nice buildable lot, which I think was reflected in the value that we received in the bid. The buyer on this property is Mike Serig. His plans is to build a two-family home on the property with an estimated value of $275,000, which, as you can see and imagine, is quite a significant difference from the illegal mobile home or trailer that was on that property previously. 410 6th Avenue West. This was one of three corner lots that had been acquired and redeveloped by Brian Bowie. The home that was on this property was demolished, two-family duplex built in its place. On the other two lots, one is a single-family home and then also another duplex in that vicinity. This is a zero lot line duplex, so the property split right along that common wall. Each unit was sold separately for $170,000. 612 Fifth Avenue West. This is a property that we recently demolished. You can see here the property is quite overgrown, the home just in bad condition. So we demolished that, and the lot's now vacant. We would expect this lot will probably remain green space, and we hope this will be sold to an adjoining property owner. We're still seeking interested buyers at this time. 610 D Avenue West, another living unit that was in really poor condition. This mobile home was condemned, not in livable condition. We acquired the property and we removed the trailer from the site. Council recently authorized the sale to an adjoining property owner, and we're expecting this to also remain as green space. And then lastly is 805 South B. This is the one I mentioned next to the Public Works shop building, materials yard. Another home in poor condition. The city acquired that property through abandonment proceedings. We demolished the structure, and as mentioned, we're holding that for potential future use by the city. So again, there are a number of properties that weren't shown there. That was meant to be just sort of a few highlights of some of the properties that have been turned over. Within the last 2 years, we've acquired 17 properties, and 9 of those have been redeveloped on. We've got 2 additional properties that are in the works, as mentioned, and then the remaining 8 have been converted into green space. I think we're making a lot of progress in removing abandoned, dilapidated structures from the city, and when you consider what we're doing with the efforts of the fire department and their nuisance and code enforcement, we think these efforts are being noticed by our residents, or at least we hope they are. The green space properties are also improving the appearance of the community. New development, again, meeting our affordable housing options, increasing tax revenues. And I should also mention that this is all infill development. The infrastructure is there. The streets are there, the utilities are there. So in addition to our active subdivisions, we have infill activity where we don't have to build streets. The developer doesn't have to build infrastructure utilities to get there. So those costs are incorporated into the value of these lots. So it really is an affordable opportunity for many who acquire these properties. So that was all I had. If you have any questions or comments, I'd be happy to take those.
Well, I mentioned this last meeting, Sean, but your department and the fire department and the code enforcement, about every week I get a compliment. You know, people are noticing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, nice job.
Before we move on, Mayor and Council, if I can get out of that. I'll just do it the old-fashioned way.
It goes black.
I figure I'll take the opportunity while I have you captive to talk about two other properties that are on our radar to potentially go after under 657A as abandoned property. And I think it's important that we have a conversation about this today. Certainly not looking for action, but I think we're all very well aware of the old spaghetti building on A Avenue.
Yep.
That property has been cited multiple times for violations and has not been put to use as we would all hope or expect. We know that we've directed a number of developers, site selectors to that particular facility, and they've sought to acquire it and have not been successful in doing so. This is a drag on our community. It's on the corridor, so it would be my preference that we would file 657A on this and see if we can win in court. If we can acquire it, great. We'll see what we can do to flip that and or demolish that. So that's one that's on my hit list. The other one would be along North Market Street. This one's a little more
North Market?
expensive. Well, and the potential, though, is far greater as far as opportunity, and it's this property here. It's the old Mercy Clinic, or excuse me, the old clinic, where the Peanut Pub used to be in the basement. That property was serving as basically a stop-in, stay by the hour, stay by the day. The property transferred ownership years ago. They evicted those people because the living conditions were not acceptable, and then they had plans to redevelop that property. None of that's come to fruition except the fact that they got everybody out of there, which is, I think, a good thing. Unfortunately, with no development and little to no contact from them after multiple attempts, I've tried over and over again by email. I've talked to the individual by phone, and I continue to get information that they're going to do something, but realistically, nothing's happened. So I think this would be another one that we'd want to have more conversation in the future. I would put this one maybe below the other property we just talked about, but I think the long-term potential to do something good in this area, there's a nice opportunity, and we could see some synergy between what might happen at the post office and going forward. So that one I wanted to put on your radar. Those are probably two bigger or higher profile properties. And that's something I would work with our legal counsel on getting
So
done.
what I heard today about that property must have been a rumor, because I heard it sold.
Which property? This one?
That one. I just heard it today. I'm just.
Timing's everything.
It's all
So,
rumors,
hey,
because
if it did, that's
it's just a word of mouth story.
We'll follow up after the meeting, see if we can figure that out. So that's all I had. I just wanted to point those two items out to you.
The old Spaghetti's, is it still owned by the same people that own the one on the south side of the square where the fire was? Or has it changed?
I think that's correct.
On the contract sale.
The property, the former Miranchito building isn't owned by the same people anymore. That's changed, but the operators of Miranchito own the old Spaghetti's on contract, yes.
So the one on the south side did change hands?
Yes.
Okay.
Give me just a second. I didn't see the transfer session.
Anything else, Mike?
No, Mayor, thank you.
Okay, very good. We'll move on then. Next one is a presentation and update from the police department's use of the spot crime program. Chief, you got the floor.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. About a year ago, we gave you a heads up on the spot crime program that we wanted to do. And recently, we've had some updates on that, and Ms. McDaniels even did a story in the Herald, which was very good. So I just wanted to give you an update and one-year review of kind of where it's taken us a little bit. So this is what it looks like. This is actually a map as of today of what Oskaloosa looked like for the last month. So you can see there's a little key on the side that tells you what is what. It doesn't give you a lot of information. The fact that all those assaults are on there, the punching fist is what it looks like. Those aren't necessarily just assaults. They're just random assaults happening. Sometimes those are recoded, but there's only a few ways we can code this, so that's how they end up coded on here. So the idea of this was to map these crimes either by month, by week, by year, so we can start looking at patterns and we can allocate resources based on that. So that's what I want to do tonight. So for people that weren't here maybe prior, I wanted to put a little bit of last year's presentation just to give you a little preview of what we were doing. We're using data-driven activity to try and allocate our resources instead of just randomly driving around the city and trying to find things. So the goal of this is to give the public, the media, city council, and our department new tools to look at what's going on so we can understand it a little bit better. So that data analysis is really my background in my former position, and it allows for appropriate allocation. So we can all use this, neighborhood groups can use this, private citizens can use this. This is really transparent and good for everybody to get involved with. What is not included? Domestic violence, mental health calls, sex crimes, and as we heard recently, something wasn't on there instantaneously. We don't post things instantly. We physically have to make a report and send it out to get it added to the website. So it is not instantaneous from our 911 center. We have to physically do that. So some people expect as soon as they hear a call on the scanner, it's going to pop up on here, and they're disappointed when it doesn't, but that's just not how it works. So this is how it looks. This is the same map. Shows you a pretty good ballpark of where things are occurring, and in a city this size, you can start to develop patterns of where things are happening if you look at it monthly or over maybe a year's time. So this is what it looks like as of today. What I look at, a lot of times we see property crimes are geographic in nature. You can find patterns with property crimes, much less so than shootings and thefts. Thefts are usually going to be around Walmart and places like that because they just have a large influx of people and they're going to have more incidents like that. But burglaries tend to be very geographical and they revolve around certain people that commit those types of crimes. We have a few people in this community that do that type of thing. So when we start seeing burglaries, you can see in the last week, 0. Some of that could be because it hasn't been reported yet. Some of that could be there just weren't any because the last 30 days we also had 0. Previous 30 days we had 3, and then the last 6 months we had 16. So that starts to point out maybe there were a few more going on, and we need to look at that. And back in the middle of the summer, we were looking at that. If you look at it geographically, all I did here is I pulled up all the burglaries that have occurred in the city in the past year. So from January 1 until today. You can definitely start seeing some patterns there. And especially there over on the west side of the city, there's a pattern that's very easy to identify. We did identify that, and we looked at that, and that's what I kind of wanted to explain a little bit about tonight. So this is a partial list of all the burglaries, and this is something, if you sign up on the website, you can log in, anybody can access this data. It tells you where it happened, the 100 block, tells you what date, and what the call was. So that's hard to identify if you're using their list, but this is much easier for us all to look at and geographically see what's going on. Now that area, there's a lot of residential over in that red circled area. There's a lot of new construction going on over there, which tended to drive some of our burglaries that were going on. You can see over by Gateway Church, there's one too that fits into this pattern, but it's an outlier for the actual geographic area we were looking at. So what we look at is when we start to see a spike, if we see 0, 0, 0, 8, we have to look at where those occur. And frequently what my investigators will look at is, did somebody just get out of jail that does these? Because we know the people in this community that tend to do these types of things. So we can look at that. We can look at crime analysis of how these are occurring. Are these construction sites that are being broken into? Because there's a few people that like to do that. They don't like houses, they like construction sites. So we look at that. And so what we came up with was, if we're looking at MO, modus operandi, for how people like to do crimes, because criminals are very habitual in how they behave sometimes. They do the same thing over and over again. Then we can send that information to, hey, so-and-so's out of jail. This is what they like to do. We're seeing a spike. Watch for these people. See if you can catch them out. Just stop them, talk to them, see what they're up to. That's what the BOLO is, be on the lookout. So what we did, we actually, we had some cameras and unmarked vehicles out there looking for certain individuals that we knew, based on their behavior, they like to behave like this. And sure enough, one of our construction sites caught him on camera, and we also caught him kicking in a door in another burglary where there was a gun stolen. So that's kind of a little bit more high profile. So oddly enough, everyone that watches crime on TV thinks we find fingerprints all the time. We don't. We don't find them all the time. But we did on this one. We found a good valid fingerprint that 6 weeks later came back and said, we have a valid hit. Do you know this person? Yes, we know that person very well. One of our suspects that we were working on. So we are in the process of trying to talk to these people, so I can't give out too much detail because it's an open case, but this is going to be closed and charged pretty much because of spot crime and watching those patterns, and that's how it works. So that's what I wanted to tell you about, and it's pretty exciting to see it work that way. In my previous job, we did this for all kinds of different types of crimes, but here, burglaries is really going to be one of the things that we're going to see this working fairly well on. So we're using it for right now. It's meeting our needs. It's a free service. We do a little bit of work, put the data in, and we can use the analytical tools. If we're finding that we're spending too much time doing manual analysis and we need more, there are some paid services out there we might want to look at down the road. But for right now, this is filling the need that we have. The officers are getting used to it. They're open to it, but it's extra work that they have to remind themselves to do because they've never done it before. So as they get better at it, they might start driving. We need more. We need more of these details. And there's another service I think costs $600 a year. It's not a crazy amount that would give us a little bit more analysis. But for right now, I think we're on the right track. Any questions?
Thank you.
Very good, thank you.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Is there such a thing as a benchmark community that you would say, okay, for Oskaloosa having roughly 11,000 in population, statistically, there would be a certain number of burglaries, certain number of assaults, that sort of thing?
We've looked at that, not necessarily here, but nationwide they've looked at that. And I can certainly get you some more information on that, but it's so dependent on what state you live in. We are very low crime compared to cities of the same type in Illinois and in Texas. Some of those, they have a lot of crime, and property crime and violent crime. We have a relatively low crime level historically across the nation, but every crime here affects somebody. We want to certainly do what we can. So is there necessarily a standard? Not really, because it's so dependent on unemployment rate, and it's so dependent on drug use, and it's so dependent on the makeup of the population, and are they from here, are they coming from other places? There's so many things that come into that. There probably is an average somewhere out there, but the average probably wouldn't mean anything to us, to be quite honest.
Okay. And a question out of left field then. So from time to time, we hear people say, boy, we sure have a lot of police officers for a population the size of what we have. Is the ratio of our officers per population higher or lower than other communities? And could a person infer that we see lower crime because of some of that too?
I would argue that it's probably the opposite if you look at that. We've looked at some of the staff studies from this area. For our population, our police force is a little touch lower than some that we would see. By contrast, we are fairly active. So people think we are out there all the time. We're everywhere. We're not, but we're pretty active. By example, I looked up, we have GPS tracking on all of our vehicles, and I looked up for 1 hour of a day, one officer, because he had been involved in something, and I wanted to see the historical data where he had been. He had touched almost the entire city the hour prior to this. I mean, he was everywhere. This one officer was everywhere, and that's part of the benefit of having a young force, which we do. They want to be active. They want to go out and do that. But it's very good because I'm driving around and I see police cars everywhere, and I know there's not that many people working, but they're all over the place, which is good. It's a benefit for all of us.
Yeah, absolutely. So,
Oh, it was an interesting presentation. What I'm disappointed about is that burglars have specialties. Like, they want to do construction sites or something. It's
Oh, yeah.
kind of crazy that they specialize, so.
And some of our construction sites have put up hunting cameras, game cameras up to try and just
That's
catch
great.
motion, and then they take some good nighttime pictures. Or sometimes our officers can look right at it and go, I know exactly who that is. Sometimes they're that good.
Yeah.
It's impressive.
That's good.
Ben, I don't know if you know this, but how long is a burglar incarcerated for? Are they letting them out?
It all depends. If we're looking at overcrowding at any point in time,
Well, that's-
they like to let burglars out because they're usually nonviolent. So violent criminals, we like to keep locked up, and sometimes if we're at a crowding situation, and I'm not saying countywide, I'm saying in prison, they like to let nonviolent criminals out.
Thank you.
And I've been dealing with burglars for 22 years. They don't like to stop what they're doing.
Chief, do I understand correctly that you're fully staffed right now?
We are fully staffed.
And you haven't had any recent turnover? You've,
The last person who left was Troy Boston, who retired with 34 years.
okay,
Yes.
that's what I thought. Thank you.
And don't forget the dog.
Good old dude. Anybody else?
no, thank you very much, Chief.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay. That gets us to the end of our agenda. Reports from city staff, city manager, anything?
None at this time, Mayor?
Okay, city clerk, anything?
No, sir, thank you.
Okay, city attorney?
Nothing, thank you.
Okay, let's head on down that line. Steve, anything?
No, sir, I'm fine, thank you.
Tom?
No, sir, thank you.
Doug?
Nothing next, sir.
Scotty?
Merry Christmas and Happy New Year.
I wondered
Yeah,
if somebody was
yeah,
gonna
yeah.
bring that up. Okay, Joe?
Nope, nothing.
No, sir.
Bob? No, that was all I
Can
had.
you back up to me a minute?
I thought you might have missed it.
Well, I didn't see my own notes.
Time's gone.
Couple things. I noticed we're looking at the flood plane again. And what I think I remember is when we did this last time, we got some properties that ended up in floodplains, but then we had to back up and now that's not really a floodplain because it was costing their insurance. Do I remember that right, Michael?
That was the mapping that was done. But this is not looking at the mapping, this is looking at the existing ordinances.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure we didn't have that happen again.
Right now, there are only 2 properties that are participating.
Yep. 2 insurance policies in the city.
Thank you. And I already mentioned the lights out at the rec center, but I noticed that some of those people were at some of the meetings, you know, saying that they're concerned about that. So it's good we're watching that. I also don't understand it, but on the alcohol permits, Hy-Vee's got new ownership, but is that just because they change board of directors all the time? You know where I'm going with this, don't you? If they're new, I want to ask them if they want to buy that parking lot. But I couldn't tell by what I read, so I thought, well, surely somebody here knows. Has Hy-Vee made a switch on something, or anybody know?
Somebody knows something.
If we don't know, we ought to find out. Because we really need them to own that parking lot.
They did put through a request for, change in their ownership, so sometimes that's just whoever they're listing as their board of directors or.
Well, because I know their board of directors, they do change, because it's their managers that do, you know.
And if they put that on there, if they want to reflect that on the new license, then it comes through to us to just put that
So-
on, so.
So my idea is, great idea, but it won't work. Probably.
Which is probably the first time.
First time you had a great idea.
I just wanted to know what you were saying, Mayor. Wanted to be clear.
They need to own that parking lot.
Thank you so
I agree.
much. Okay, let's see. Joe, Bob?
Thank you.
Okay. So, yeah, I guess I would finish up by saying that I wanted to offer our deep appreciation to the chamber for the lighting downtown. That gets better and better and more buzz every year. And so, very impressive job on that. The activities, the lighted Christmas parade have really made Christmas a special thing in Oskaloosa, and I think made a lot of memories for young parents, kids, and by having it on Saturday, brought in a lot of folks who wouldn't have been here otherwise.
That was a good idea.
So, high compliments to that. As always, Merry Christmas. Enjoy this time, and what a blessing it is to be in a city like Oskaloosa to do it. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Move on.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned.